All right, good morning, everyone. We're ready to get started and calling the meeting of the TRPA Environmental Improvement Program Committee to order. The date is Wednesday, January 28th, and it is 9:04 a.m. The first item on the agenda is a roll call to determine a quorum. And Tracy, I believe you're doing the honors today.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Conrad Seda?
Here. I'm here.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Fastinos?
Here.
Ms. Lane?
She's here somewhere.
Circle back. Mr. Rice?
Here.
Mr. Settlemeyer?
Here.
Ms. Williamson? Here. Ms. Lane? Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you very much. The first item on our agenda is now going to, or the next item actually, is to go over the remote and in-person meeting rules for the day. Remote committee members, please remember to raise your hands to speak and mute your microphones unless speaking to help cut back on background noise. If you're viewing the webinar on a personal computer in the room, please ensure that your microphone and speakers are turned off to prevent audio feedback. Members of the public who have joined us in person, please raise your hand at the appropriate time for public comment, and you'll be called upon to the front of this room to speak. Committee members who are in person, please raise your hand if you wish to comment, state your name, and speak clearly into the microphone in front of you. If you're viewing the webinar on a personal computer, please ensure that your microphone and speakers are turned off to prevent feedback into the room. The first item on our agenda is public comment period for any items listed on the agenda. Any member of the public wishing to address the committee on an agenda item, please raise your hand now, either in person or by clicking the raise hand button on your Zoom screen or by dialing *9 on your phone, and you'll be called upon and unmuted by a TRPA staff member. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. This comment period is reserved for items on the agenda. Comments on other matters may be redirected to the public interest comment period before the adjournment of the meeting. So do we have any persons who would like to come to the podium? Okay, thank you. Welcome. Please state your name for the record.
Sorry. Good morning, Chair, members of the committee. Laura Patton. I'm the Natural Resource Director at the League to Save Lake Tahoe, or Keep Tahoe Blue. I'd like to thank staff, particularly Dan and Mason, who are about to give a presentation, and really all the partners and scientists that move the threshold updates forward that we're going to be talking about shortly. The bi-state compact is really clear. TRPA must establish, achieve, and maintain threshold carrying capacities as the primary tool to prevent environmental degradation. I'm really here today to talk about the thresholds and just our support for updating these overall. The thresholds, as you know, are not optional. They're not aspirational. They're really the legal foundation of the TRPA regional plan and the regulatory decisions. So for this reason, we really strongly support the scientifically vetted proposed forest health threshold, including standards for stand density, wildfire behavior, and all the things that really protect our environment and the wildland-urban interface. These updates reflect the best available science and really respond directly to today's climate and wildfire realities. We also support the restructure of the water quality thresholds, but it's critical that retained standards really remain actionable and really continue to inform land use and stormwater decisions as well. The forest health updates show that comprehensive science-based modernization is achievable. We really encourage TRPA to apply that same rigor across all the threshold categories before the next threshold evaluation, so that thresholds really truly reflect the environmental conditions that we're managing today. We really hope that we can work together meaningfully with TRPA to continue to bring thresholds like this up to date, working with partners, with the Science Council, and really thank you all, particularly staff, Science Council, the Tahoe Fire and Fuels team, and others for your leadership and support on moving these forward today and continuing to update these thresholds. Thank you.
Anyone else in the room? Thank you. Please step forward.
Good morning, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Bob Larson. I work for the California Natural Resources Agency, and I serve as the program officer for the Tahoe Science Advisory Council. As you may have heard, the TRPA, as part of the threshold process, engaged with the council to conduct an independent peer review of the proposed thresholds. The complete review and a summary are available online, and I just want to share a few thoughts with you today. First, I want to thank Drs. Hugh Safford and Pat Manley for their time and thoughtful feedback. Both reviewers engaged early in the process, reviewed initial draft proposals, and met with staff multiple times to provide their thoughts, suggestions, and feedback. Next, I want to stress that the proposal you're going to hear today represents an important step forward for the basin. Both reviewers found that the proposed thresholds are consistent with current science and best practices, and the selected metrics reflect core drivers of forest health and wildfire risk. These standards represent a long overdue update of the current system. At the same time, the reviewers identified opportunities to strengthen the program in the future. In particular, they emphasized the need for additional work in the performance metrics so that TRPA can address other ecosystem services like old growth quality, biodiversity, and carbon sequestration. They also encouraged TRPA to consider complementary metrics such as stand density indices, and noted the importance of investing in regular monitoring to support adaptive management in the face of climate change. Finally, the reviewers highlighted the challenges related to the ongoing evolution of the remote sensing and modeling tools that are the basis for these new standards. So taken together, the peer review supports moving forward now while clearly pointing to where further refinement can add value in the future. Putting on a different hat, I also want to note that TRPA reached out to staff from the Governor's Wildfire and Forest Task Force to ensure that the proposed standards are aligned with statewide forest health and wildfire resilience priorities. While there are obvious differences in scale, the Tahoe Basin efforts are consistent with and will contribute to the broader California forest management strategies. This alignment strengthens both the scientific credibility and the relevance of the proposed updates. So with that, I'd like to encourage the committee to advance the proposed updates that you're going to hear about today, as they set a strong foundation for scientific accountability and continued improvement. I'll just close by saying that I really appreciate the opportunity to facilitate the science management dialogue here in the Tahoe Basin. As mentioned, there are a lot of standards coming before you in the future, and I look forward to further conversation with you. So thank you.
Anyone else in the room? Hey, if not, Tracy, do we have anyone online?
Madam Chair, we have no hands raised online to comment.
Great, thank you. With that, then we will close the public hearing, and we're going to move to approval of the agenda. Staff, are there any updates to the agenda, Kim?
No, they are not. Thanks.
All right, so then the agenda is deemed approved as posted, and we'll move on to approval of the minutes, and that is for July 23rd, 2025 on page 29 of the packet. Does any member of the committee wish to make a motion?
So moved.
Okay. And all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. Thank you. Well, now for moving on to item 4, the meat of our meeting is the update to the water quality environmental threshold carrying capacity threshold standards. And this item is going to be introduced by staff member Dan Segan to present. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and members of the committee. Dan Segan, TRPA staff. I normally start these presentations by highlighting the importance of the threshold standards to the work that we do, but I think Ms. Patton already did that in public comment. So I'm going to spare you those couple minutes and dive right in. Next slide, please. So you're going to be hearing 2 separate presentations today on updating threshold standards. The first, I'll be presenting on the water quality standards, and then I'll turn it over to Mason to present on the forest health standards. A bit of context setting here, the presentations you're going to be hearing are quite different because the updates that we are considering in each of the 2 realms are quite different. This threshold update initiative really has 2 different and distinct elements. One is the administrative cleanup of our thresholds, and the water quality standards that we are proposing that you consider today fall into that bucket. And I'll say a little bit more about that later. And then there's the substantive review of the content of the threshold standards. And the forest health standards that you'll be hearing about a little bit later fall into that secondary bin of core substance. What are we driving at? Next slide, please. So the administrative cleanup of our threshold standards really started about 10 years ago. This was a report by the Tahoe Science Advisory Council that looked at 10 other natural resource management systems and basically provided us with guidance on how to revise and improve the quality of not just our threshold standards, but the entire system of data management that we use to drive towards attainment of those standards. And based on those recommendations, we started this process of working through what's in our standards today and what do we want to be in our standards tomorrow. Next slide, please. And we started that really by taking stock of where we stood today. So this dates back almost 9 years ago as well, now 2017. And we did a full assessment of where our standards sit today relative to best practice as identified by the Science Advisory Council. And they highlighted a number of things. And one that I've highlighted on the screen today is we had a number of overlapping standards. Next slide, please. That may sound a little bit strange, but basically when the original system was identified, we included protections for the same element under multiple threshold categories. So you'll remember we have 10 categories of threshold standards. And while we regularly acknowledge that protection from one category is implemented across categories, when they were first adopted, that wasn't always the case. And so the thought was, if SEZs are important, let's put that everywhere. And one of the things the Science Advisory Council highlighted is when you have this type of redundancy within your standard framework, it causes confusion about what you are trying to attain. And it means that your reporting is also more confusing because you're assessing the same thing 3 different times and either taking credit for it 3 times or being dinged for not attaining it 3 times. Next slide, please. So about 6 years ago, we started going through the process of reorganizing and addressing the issues that were identified in that. And so we went through a process where we said, okay, where are we seeing this multiple lines of protection for the same thing? And where can we combine standards? And we adopted those changes. We also did something else relatively simple that the council advised us to do. So the top of the screen is the standards as they were initially written. And you can see they were sort of in these large paragraphs. And what the council urged us to do is break apart these paragraphs and identify both for yourselves and for the public what is an individual standard, and then number that so we can have an informed conversation about, is water quality standard 3 what we're driving for, or should we change it? So this board adopted those changes a little over 5 years ago. Next slide, please. And then we started working on things that were a little bit harder within the administrative cleanup. So that's sort of the easiest stuff that you can do. Remove redundancy, number your standards. And so we engaged the council again. They've sort of been our guide in this and said, okay, you've said there's other issues related to our standards. How should we go about addressing those issues? And we started with the water quality side of our standards because it's some of the most numerous of our standard categories. There were a little over 40 some standards within the water quality. So that's 1 in every 3 standards if you're trying to keep track in your head. Next slide, please. And the Science Advisory Council again gave us guidance on how we should be reformulating and thinking about threshold standards. And that led us as an agency to adopt an adaptive management structure that outlined both what a threshold standard should be and where it should fit into our system of information and how we drive management towards attainment of those threshold standards. And so what the things that we adopted as part of this adaptive management structure within the regional plan and the threshold standards were 3 core criteria for what every threshold standard should be. Every threshold standard must be specific, it must be measurable, and it must be outcome-based. And I'll talk a little bit more about each as we go. And that basically they said, look, this is where we should be heading in the future, but your current standards are a mishmash of just about everything you care about. it's not the most important things that you're driving towards. It includes everything from your day-to-day activities to those things that you really care about. And in order to be an effective communicator, both to your board and to the public, you need to start to distinguish between these things and put them in the right place within your system. Next slide, please. And so they really identified there's 4 different areas where our system works together, information flows through our system to drive management. So we have our big goals, our threshold standards at the top of that. We have how we implement that through the regional plan, the code of ordinances, and the environmental improvement program. We have the monitoring that we do to figure out how we are trending towards these, and then reporting and evaluation on progress so that we understand what's working, what's not working, and what can be revised. Next slide, please. And so they looked at our water quality standards, and it's actually very hard to read on this slide. I apologize. It is in your packet as well. But on the far right-hand side of the slide is what the Science Council said was the role for each of our water quality standards. And they said some of these serve that ultimate purpose role. Some of them really are more about explaining what you're doing to a lay audience. And some of them are really about working towards that goal. Next slide, please. And they identified these 4 different categories. One are goals. That's how a plain language summary of what we are trying to do. That's saying something like, we are trying to maintain good water quality in Lake Tahoe. That's something they said we should retain, but retain it for communication purposes. The second one was objectives. And objectives is the specific and measurable articulation of that goal of good water quality in Lake Tahoe. What we mean is 100 feet of clarity within our lake. And they said those should be our threshold standards. Then they said the next level down from that is strategies. So how are we as managers driving towards that ultimate goal? And one strategy to improve water quality within Lake Tahoe is reducing pollutant load. And so they said, retain these things where you're driving towards a specific strategy, retain those as EIP performance measures, because it's important for us to know and to track as a partnership how well we are implementing the programs and strategies that we think are going to improve clarity. And finally, at the next level was tactics. This is actually how you reduce your pollutant load. So our general strategy is reducing pollutant load, and our tactics for doing so are private parcel BMPs, street sweeping, all of these things that we as a partnership do to reduce pollutant load. And it's really important, while there's sort of this imposed hierarchy here, the council emphasized all of these are important. They're not saying any one of these is less or more important. And it's important to track what you're doing towards each of these, and also to understand why you are doing it. Because if you don't understand why you're doing it and how it fits into your system, you can't revise and improve. So if we don't understand why we're reducing pollutant load and what we expect from reducing pollutant load, we can never improve and understand if we're doing the right thing by reducing pollutant load. Next slide, please. So the council provided this extremely simple recommendation that basically said, where you've got strategies or tactics, get rid of them as threshold standards and move on. And the reason you're hearing a 15-20-minute presentation about that is because it implicated 2/3 of our water quality standards. They basically said there's so much of these other things, you actually just need to put them in the right part of your system. Next slide, please. And so we've talked a lot about this sort of structure, and this is the structure that we adopted, where we have these tactics, which is the far left of your screen, the inputs, the actions that we do. We have strategies thereafter. That's the exact, that's the overall umbrella in which those individual tactics fit. And fortunately, we're not updating our threshold standards on our own. We've actually been updating them with the entire Environmental Improvement Program partnership. And the Environmental Improvement Program agreed on this structure as well, and said, we will continue to use and report on these tactics and strategies as part of our EIP performance measures. And you take the threshold standards, the end objectives, and retain those as threshold standards. Next slide, please. And so how do we actually implement that recommendation? How do we move our tactics and strategies into other parts of our system? So we're fortunate for most of these on the screen today. These are, we have a set for surface runoff and for groundwater. These are mostly included in our code of ordinances and regional plan already. These are things that we are hoping to achieve, or we require people that are developing a private parcel to do. They are restrictions on your development. They mirror other restrictions on development within our regional plan and code of ordinances that ensure that as parcels are developed, that property owner is doing its part to keep Tahoe's water quality good. Next slide, please. So we don't need to make, oh, this is actually where they show up in the code of ordinances. I forgot it was 2 different slides. So they're already there. So you don't need to adopt a change to ensure that they're there. Next slide, please. The second is a suite of load reduction standards that we are recommending are retained within our code of ordinances. There are 2 load reduction standards, are retained as environmental improvement program performance measures. So these are things that we monitor and report on. There are 2 that we don't currently monitor and report on. One relates to iron loading. So we discontinued our iron monitoring a long time ago at the advice of the Science Advisory Council. They recently reviewed our monitoring program and did not recommend including it, although there's a number of other recommendations for expansion of the monitoring program. And the second is a reference to other algal nutrients, also which we monitor the important algal nutrients of the day. So there's no recommended change there. Unfortunately, there is not a huge windfall in terms of agency savings from monitoring, from implementing these proposals. When I was reviewing the materials last night, it referenced 200,000 annually in water quality monitoring expenditures. That actually was not updated from the 2020 version of this report. We're about 275 annually right now in our contribution. And we expect that to continue to grow, and we will continue to monitor all of these. Next slide, please. So the ultimate recommendation includes retaining the 11 core outcome-based water quality standards, the Threshold Update Initiative Stakeholder Working Group, otherwise known as the TUI-SWIG, who we have 2 members on the committee today, recommended moving forward with this set of changes after considering this proposal for the 5th time, I believe, on Monday. I don't know if either member of the committee wants to weigh in on those discussions or if I've missed or omitted anything. Okay. They unanimously voted to move forward with these changes. With that, I will conclude my presentation and ask for any questions, comments.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Segan. Board members, do you have any comments? Well, first of all, I want to thank our committee members that participated in the TUI-SWIG, if I'm saying that right. And I mean, obviously, it's been a ton of work, and to the Science Committee also, just to express my deep appreciation for everyone's commitment to that. I mean, obviously, this work, needs to be validated, needs to be science-based, and we need to have the folks with the utmost credentials in being able to do that. So I really thank you for all of that. And I don't know if our 2 TUI-SWIG members want to say anything about it.
Sure. Ashley Conrad-Sater for the record. Just, I really appreciate that this body in general makes science-based decisions, and that we really, in everything that we've talked about this morning, Dan detailed that process. It's not taken lightly. We don't make any of these decisions without evidence. And so I just really appreciate the detail, and I'm excited that we have some very specific and measurable goals that we can hopefully attain through investment of this EIP and other programs.
Great. Mr. Settlemeyer?
Thank you. I wanted to make sure to thank the staff and the rest of the board members and all the hard work that went into this. And while the vote was unanimous, it was not argumentative, but there was tons and tons of discussion back and forth in order to try to land at a place that all of us could agree to for the betterment of the Tahoe area.
Yeah, this is definitely hard work and very impressive in terms of the way that it ended up being organized. And so getting consensus on these kinds of issues is always a little challenging, but clearly we have the right path moving forward. So any other members wishing to speak to? We don't have anyone online, right, Catherine? Board members? Oh, and I'm sorry. Did you have anything?
Ms. Seda is online and Ms. Luma.
Yeah, I'm just happy to know that I'm on this committee and I apologize because I was across the hall working. I'm like, wait, I'm on this committee. So my apologies for coming in late. Thank you to staff for coming and dragging me out.
All right. So anyone else online? Sorry.
Not on this committee.
No, okay, great. Okay, so I think we're at the point now where we need a motion regarding this item. Anyone wishing to make that motion? Mr. Saddlemeyer.
I would motion to recommend the adoption of the water quality and environmental threshold carrying capacities as presented in attachment A.
Great. All right, Tracy, can we have a vote?
Ms. Conrad Seda,
Yes.
Mr. Rice,
Yes.
Mr. Settlemyer,
Yes.
Ms. Williamson,
Yes.
Ms. Lane,
Yes.
Ms. Fastinos.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes.
Great. Thank you all for your hard work. And again, just kudos to staff for putting this together. So we are now on agenda item 5, update to the vegetation preservation environmental threshold carrying capacity. And information on this item can be found on page 201. So I believe that we're going to have a brief introduction from Julie before we turn this over to Mason. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, all. Julie Reagan, TRPA's Executive Director. We're going to continue your science workshop this morning with our next item, and I appreciate the attention on this. Wanted to just do some brief introductory remarks before Mason Bindle does his presentation. To put this in some context, the last threshold evaluation that you all endorsed at the board last year included data through the year 2023. And if you remember, that means that the data that we analyzed as part of that 4-year evaluation report included a lot of large wildfires that impacted our lake community. A couple to jog your memory: the Loyalton and Creek fires, 2020, Tamarack and Dixie fires of 2021, the Oak and Mosquito fires of 2022, and then, of course, the Caldor of 2021, which deeply affected our basin. Many of us had to evacuate, and if you were a part of the recruitment for the executive director position, you'll recall my props, which I brought one today. These are embers that I found in my yard in Christmas Valley, and I still continue, oddly, all these years later, to continue finding these. I keep this at my desk to remember the urgency of the matter, which I know our community shares. And so we know that science shows now that forest thinning implemented by our Tahoe Fire and Fuels team meaningfully influenced the fire behavior and the outcomes of Caldor, and that we did not lose a single permanent home in the Tahoe Basin, no lives lost, and 10,000 acres burned with some high severity in the Tahoe Basin. The threshold evaluation highlighted how smoke from those wildfires affected our air quality in Tahoe. Again, if you recall, it was like Armageddon at the time. The orange sun, I'm actually feeling chills from the experience myself. So it's no surprise that our threshold evaluation and our public engagement process has highlighted these themes, and that we know air quality is affecting our basin and our lake water quality as well. So in response to that feedback, you asked us as staff to double down on the work to improve forest health and community wildfire protection. And we did that, elevating forest health and wildfire to a strategic priority in TRPA's work plan. And today we're making good on the part of the promise to update our standards. And I just want to make sure we didn't lose the Zoom. Okay, all right, very good. So we're asking you today to consider important updates to the forest health standards. This is not the first time that we've talked about forest health and our standards, and in many ways, today's action is a continuation of some work that started after the Angora wildfire, which many of us experienced back in 2007, and the recommendations of the Bi-State Governor's Blue Ribbon Commission Task Force. In addition to making specific recommendations for on-the-ground management, the commission highlighted that the threshold standards that TRPA has in vegetation did not address fire safety in the region. I'll leave it to Mason to go into the details of the science related to the proposed forest health standards, but I'll steal some of the thunder just here to say that the headline is that today we're specifically addressing the concern of the commission and the public and asking you to consider a new threshold for community wildfire protection. And that is historic in our history of standards in this area. That standard, as well as a fire standard for the general forest, acknowledges that many already know. Fire is part of our forest and our community. And the question is not if another wildfire will burn around or in Tahoe, but when it will burn, how it will burn, and how our communities will be prepared and resilient in the face of these challenges. These new standards better align with our partners' goals and set us on a pathway for healthier forests and safer communities. And with that, and we're back up on the screen, I will turn it over to Mason Bindle, who's done an incredible amount of work with our partners, with the public, and look forward to his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie, for that thoughtful intro. Mason Bindle, TRPA staff, for the record. As Julie mentioned, the Caldor fire wasn't really just a data point for us. It was a lived experience, and that really brought the urgency of this threshold update to the fourfold. And we're happy today to bring a proposal that will reduce that risk of catastrophic wildfire, set a goal, an ambitious target to restore the health of our forests so that they persist for generations. So with that, next slide, we'll jump into the meat of the proposal. So to understand how we got to the point where we have the risk of catastrophic wildfire as a likely outcome in our forests, we need to take ourselves back 150 years. During the Comstock era of the late 1800s, the settlers that showed up, they experienced a mature, old growth, late cereal condition, with many of the trees having experienced wildfire many times, 10 to 15 years on average. And that forest, had been managed by the Washoe tribe and natural ignitions to be resilient in the face of fire, and was fire dependent landscape, right? But the Comstock era led to clear cuts of the basin to support the mining in Virginia City. Over 60% of the basin was clear cut. And then the forest that came back, it grew up during the age of fire suppression. In 1924, the Forest Service put in a policy to put every fire out by 10 a.m. So that fire-dependent ecosystem missed many fire cycles over the last 100 years, leading to an overly dense, even-age stand that we see today. And the risk of wildfire is ever present now. And then the drought stress that we saw during the early 2000s, mid-2000s with the mega drought led to high mortality events and the forest's inability to protect itself from the beetles that naturally occur. Disease is rampant, and in 2023, we saw 1.6 million trees die on the West Shore, an unprecedented number in that aerial survey detection count. So the urgency that our community requires of us to update our standards and get in line with some of the land management actions that have been going is real and ever present. So that's the legacy of the forest that we've had. Next slide, please. And the wake-up call really came in 2007 with the Angora fire, where we saw firsthand the wildfire come out of the general forest and into our communities and burn over 200 homes in a matter of hours. And this was really the first time that we recognized the danger that was ever present around us with the overstock stands and the overgrown forest. Next slide, please. And as Julie mentioned, post-Angora, the state leaders, local leaders got together and really did a full assessment of what went down during the Angora fire. And we got in line as TRPA staff and quickly updated and streamlined our permitting requirements to get fuels reduction projects on the ground. We created MOUs, memorandums of understanding, with all our major landowners to allow more streamlined projects and investment in our forest health. And then we updated our tree removal permitting so private parties could remove more trees and create defensible space in and around our community. And then recently, Dr. Kat McIntyre worked through the board with you all to update our code to allow mechanical equipment to get on our steep slopes, which has increased the pace and scale of projects to restore the health of our forests. Next slide, please. And really this work, it'd be remiss if we didn't mention the partnership. Everything in Tahoe is done through the partnership, by the partnership. And the Tahoe Fire and Fuels team, in particular, Annabelle Monty, the leader of the Tahoe Fires and Fuels team, has been instrumental in crafting this proposal. We've met with that group 4 times formally at their meetings. And I think we've met with staff and practitioners at almost every one of these agencies you see on the screen here. And that's really crafted the proposal you're going to see today. Next slide, please. And then beyond that, we looked to the land management plans and the wealth of science that's come online in the last 10 years to understand what our clear, specific, measurable targets should be and what our partners are managing for to draft this proposal. And we'd be, lost without the science that's come in the last 10 years, really making the proposal you see today, the specific measurable targets possible. And I've personally been engaged with crafting indicators like this since the Lake Tahoe West Landscape Resilience Assessment that we started in 2017. And you'll see that proposed action come online this year. Actually, that decision for Lake Tahoe West to hit the ground and get some forest health projects underway is really based in similar indicators that we're going to propose today. Next slide, please. And a little bit more about the process, right? So you all crafted or decided that this should be our strategic priority, one of our strategic priorities for this year because of the community concern around wildfire risk, right? So we released a draft proposal in May after we looked to those land management plans to understand what indicators would be specific, measurable, and achievable with the data that we have. And then we worked through over the summer, the science partnership. We worked with Bob and the peer review council to craft and revise that proposal, and then released a website in November. Worked with our communications team to articulate what we were actually proposing through these standards and engage with the public in a survey. And so some of the modifications that have come throughout that process, right? We've set target levels that are going to adapt to warmer or drier future. So they go a little bit beyond what we've been managing for in the past and create ambitious targets for us to adapt to the climate we're going to see in the future for our forest. We've increased the late cereal percentage that we want in the distribution of the forest mosaic we'd like to see, as you know, that is going to be a resilient factor for forests in the future. And then we've added a standard for subalpine conifer through the work with the Tahoe TUISWIG, so Threshold Update Initiative Stakeholder Working Group. And Director Settlemeyer and member Conrad Seda are both part of that group. And if you'd like to add to that process or anything yet, so okay. And then we reviewed aspen protections and found that aspen are sufficiently protected, and the TUISWIG members agreed, and on Monday voted to advance the proposal you'll see today. Next slide, please. And yeah, as I mentioned, we put out a public website with our communications team, and we've solicited some public feedback. And what we found is that there are many members of the public that are highly educated on this matter and very engaged, right? So they all understand the need to manage our forests back to a healthy state, and the concern for wildfire mitigation was the top priority across most comments. There's a strong mandate to, you know, as I said, manage the forest, because we understand that if we just let it be, the risk of catastrophic wildfire is probably the likely outcome. And then there's a high value for ecosystem diversity. And you'll see that throughout the proposal that what we're trying to create is a healthy forest mosaic with these standards. And then they also want us to engage with visitors and new members of the public so that everyone can understand the urgency and understand the issues we face and why we're setting these goals. And so with our threshold update, threshold evaluation, we will be transparent in how we assess the status and trend of these goals. Next slide, please. And with that, let's dive into the proposal. So as Dan mentioned, we have 10 categories of thresholds, and under the vegetation preservation, we're proposing 2 new subcategories. One, fire dynamics, will address the risk of wildfire and the behavior and the outcomes we'd like to see, particularly in different management zones in and around our communities and throughout the general forest. And then the second subcategory, forest structure, will actually get to what the type and condition of forest we'd like to see, things like stand density, cereal stage, basal area. So next slide, please. So first, the fire dynamic standard. We know that if we do nothing and the catastrophic wildfire risk persists, we could get outcomes like the Caldor fire, where in the general forest, we saw over 5,000 acres of high severity wildfire. The picture on the left, you see that firsthand, where soils have been burned, seed sources lost, erosion outcomes will be high. And that forested area that burned at high severity is so large, it will struggle to regenerate because of the distance from seed sources. And so we're proposing 2 standards. In the orange, we have the WUI defense zone, the wildland urban interface defense zone. Here, the goal is community wildfire safety, protect our life and property. So there, we're going to propose a standard that gets at that. And then in the green, you see the wildland urban interface threat zone, general forest. In that area, we're going to propose fire dynamics that will have beneficial ecological outcomes and avoid loss. So next slide, please. So the first standard, wildland urban interface defense zone fire dynamics, really aims to promote surface fire as the most likely outcome on much of the landscape. This is where we feel, or science has shown us, that our land managers can engage. We saw this firsthand with the Caldor fire outcomes, right? Like Julie mentioned, some of that luck, we got lucky with the weather and the way the fire came in, but some of that luck was created for us by the U.S. Forest Service. The shaded fuel break in and around my home Julie and I both live within a pine cone's throw of the burn scar, right? It was the reason that fire came down from crown fire to a surface fire, and gave our firefighters the ability to shepherd that fire away from our community, and the reason I came back to a home intact. So this standard, we really think, promotes that community wildfire safety, and is really one of the standards that was most welcome in the community feedback we've gotten so far. Next slide, please. And then within the general forest and the WUI threat zone, we really want the ecological outcomes of beneficial fire. We live in a fire-dependent landscape. These forests need fire. But when that fire shows up, how does it act? How does it behave? So if we get fire that exceeds 200 acres of high severity, that area will struggle to regenerate. So the seed sources will be too far, the soil too burned. So we want this standard to act as an outcome base where the land managers will go out and break up those areas that are most likely to burn at high severity. Next slide, please. And then the second subcategory, forest structure, right? We know that our forests are even aged, overstocked, competing for resources. And we see on the right that competition firsthand. The image shows 100 years of overstock stand, a tree that has competed for water, competed for light, and has grown at a very slow rate. And then forest restoration action in the last comes in, and then 8 years of rampant growth for that forest, and can have less competition and experience rigor and growth that will survive a fire. And then on the left, you see that overcrowded stand firsthand. So next slide. So the first standard, we really want to create a healthy mosaic of late or serial conditions. So serial conditions are the sizes and age of the forest. And so across the forest, we need to have a mosaic of those conditions. And the dominant condition in the recommended standard will be late serial, that mature older tree with the ability to accept fire as surface fire. And so this standard really aims to create a patchwork, a mosaic, where right now we see the dominance is the middle-aged stand, and that creates a continuity that's at risk of catastrophic wildfire. So the serial stage standard not only addresses late serial, but early serial recruitment, and those middle-aged stands, the right mix of those in the right places, and allows our land managers to break up some of that continuity and that even age stand that we see today. Next slide, please. And the second forest structure standard is really just about trees per acre. How many trees is right? How many trees can we accept on the landscape that can accept disturbance in a healthy way? So the stand density targets are going to set aggressive, ambitious targets to get us to a resilient state. The forest of your childhood, the overstock stand that we saw, is not the forest that will persist into the future. We know we have too many trees, and the crowding has caused competition that's increased mortality and the risk of wildfire. So this standard will really get us at a goal towards reducing stand densities to a healthy state. And then next slide, please. And then as we heard in Tui-Swig, we were missing some protections, right? So the subalpine conifer species in our high elevations, particularly whitebark pine, are at risk of climate change, being extirpated from climate change. And we don't really have structure standards that science can point to around how many trees per acre or size class. So we really want to get to a point where we have a non-degradation standard that protects these conifers in those sensitive zones. So think, the top of Heavenly, top of Friel Peak, right? Those subalpine conifers are missing protection within our system. So adding this standard as recommended by Tui-Swig really gives us that protection for conifer species from the ridge all the way down to the lake. And then, with that, next slide. So that's the breadth of the proposal. I welcome any questions or comments before we proceed to a motion.
Thank you for that comprehensive presentation. Do we have any committee members that want to make comments or ask questions? Ms. Rip?
Yeah, thanks so much, Mason. I just, this is Ashley Conrad. I just wanted to reflect that, we're learning as we go. And I think the evidence from the Caldor fire was really helpful to see how these treatments make a difference. And the more we can get enough information to focus our investments where we can bring fire down to the ground is really great. And so I really appreciate that we're making decisions and moving forward, even as we're learning and even as the science improves. And I think it's really important that we continue to do that and we not wait for, science to be settled, because climate change is moving so quickly that the science is changing just as quickly, or not changing, but the science is evolving. And so, I just really appreciate that we're making these decisions and moving forward. And I know we, got some public comments that essentially said that we're, it's a dereliction of our duty and we're not making good decisions. But I do think these are science-backed and informed decisions that reflect on everything that we're learning and allow us to target our investments and our resources to protect not only communities, but also keep landscapes intact and retain forests as forests. And that's really the critical piece here, is that we don't move from forests into a different condition over time that could ultimately lead to potentially development. So just thank you so much to the team and to everyone engaging in this process.
Any other members wishing to make comments? Yes,
Madam
yes.
Chair,
Yes, thanks.
yeah, back in '07, I was a member of the Fire Safe Council. And it seemed as though we were at odds with TRPA on many levels. I can remember having to buy pine needles to get better coverage on my property, and right before everything burned. I can remember the progress that the Fire Safe Council made in those days, where we would go on to property and we would put different colored tapes on different areas depending upon the coverage that should be there. 2 weeks before the fire, I had a friend visiting, and we took a drive around the lake. And as we got to the other slope, I'm sorry, your side, the other side, I told him that this was a disaster waiting to happen. And unfortunately, 2 weeks later, it did. I want to thank TRPA for what they are now doing. I am proud to be a member of this organization and see what they're doing for those of us that live in Awui. I look out my back window every day, and I'm so thankful that my yard can look the way that it does versus the way that it used to have to look. I can actually see the forest through the trees. And when you can't see the forest because of the trees, you're in trouble. And I think that we are headed in the right direction. And thank you for all the work that you've done.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What I see this presentation, it's fabulous. What my question is how are we really going to monitor it and implement it? Because what I'm seeing as a result of the Caldor fire already are tons of spotted growths of Jeffreys. They're all like 3-4 feet high right now, but there's probably 50 of them within 20 feet. I don't see the Forest Service coming to take care of that. Now would be the time to do it, right? Before they get a whole lot bigger. So how is this going? Who's in charge? How is it going to be coordinated, monitored? And how are we going to see this thinning and a little better management of the forest in reality?
That's a great question. And part of the charge of the Science Council's peer review is to lead us the right way and the data that we can use to make these targets specific, measurable, and track status and trend over time. And we believe that there's going to be a great investment opportunity for on the ground monitoring that'll marry up with the remote sensing so that we can look at the status and trend of these goals at scale. But there is more to do there, and we're tracking it actively. And we have a plan in place to get the data we need for the 4-year assessment cycle.
And if I could just add quickly with that train of thought, that it seems like, the benefit of all of this is going to be in prioritizing projects under the EIP program, so that we can secure the funding. The Forest Service, state parks, whoever, the actual land managers are, can use this data and this science and these new thresholds to establish those priorities. So I know that you wanted to interject there, Kim, but Julie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Julie Reagan here, TRPA's Executive Director. And I also wanted to invite Annabelle Monti and to come up and just say a few words, because we just actually had a meeting yesterday of the fire chiefs where we were discussing in the Tahoe Fire and Fuels team some of the points raised by Ms. Lane, who has deep experience in this matter as well. I want to take the opportunity to put on the record, because we have had so many public comments that are legitimate and heartfelt. We have a role to play in a very broad partnership, and we are not a public safety entity, and we are not physically fighting fires. We rely on the fire service and our partners to do that. And the land managers and the Forest Service, having nearly 80% of the land in the basin, is a key partner to implement. But that is part of the consistency of how we look at our standards is set at this table. And you, as the policy makers, can update these standards in a way that everyone can work together, you know, shooting for that same North Star of getting a healthier forest. Where before, I mean, our standards are 25 years old and the science has evolved so much. We have a much better picture of how to monitor, how to deploy the funding that we do get, which is much greater than a lot of areas in the West that are dealing with the same thing. And we are fortunate to have federal, state, local, private funding to support this. We need to make sure those dollars are going to those kind of projects. The restoration work is underway for Caldor. There's an environmental assessment out on the street. But I would love Ms. Monty just to say a few words, because that has been a conversation and a topic that the working groups have had.
Good morning, everybody. Annabelle Monty. I'm the program manager for the Tahoe Fire and Fuels team. I just want to give a very loud shout out to Mason and the TRPA staff for the work that has gone into asking everybody their opinion on these topics. And as you know, everybody has opinions and everybody has priorities, but I think Mason and the TRPA staff have done a really great job of engaging those scientific voices that can really best inform what we know about forest ecosystems at this point in time and how we can best manage in the face of the challenges that the Tahoe Basin is facing. Specifically to the point, that's what this collaborative is all about. And Mason has spent a ton of time sitting down with all of the practitioners, those foresters, those wildland fire professionals that know this landscape inside and out, as well as know the challenges firsthand of how these forests are reacting today with the issues that we're seeing, whether that be fire, whether that be bugs, whether that be drought, whatever that is. And I really have to acknowledge the integration of real world on the ground implementation into these threshold standards that we're talking about, and how that reflects what is manageable, what is feasible, and what is realistic to track and be able to see these trends over time. I think my biggest comment back to Mason as part of these conversations was, it's really hard to see these trees grow in 4 years. You know, how do we really show this, that we're making progress? And he's taken that back to his staff and the team. And I do think that while that's a really quick snapshot, we have the opportunity to capitalize on the opportunities that the Tahoe Basin has right now, exactly for that reason. I have worked in fire restoration my entire career, and looking at some places in the Caldor fire and the Tamarack fire and in other fires in this region, I share the same thoughts of, man, it'd be really easy to take care of this right now. One of the challenges that we're facing with is with these large land managers being federal agencies, with the Forest Service in particular for the Caldor, that's a big ship to turn, and it takes a long time to get things in place. I will say that the amount of focus and the amount of maybe pressure is not the right word, but the amount of focus being placed on these things, the Caldor EA is going to get signed this year, and they're ready to start implementing as soon as possible. And so while it might not seem like, man, you know, that was 2021, that was a long time ago, that's actually kind of lightning speed for some of these partners to be able to get dirt moving on the ground. And that is in part not only to the collaboration and partnership, but also to be able to have thresholds to call back to keep those agencies accountable to this is what we're moving towards. So thank you to the TRPA staff for updating this. I don't think that this is groundbreaking information in any way. I think this is all stuff that we all know. It's just nice to have it reflected in a way that all of us are working off of the same play card. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, much appreciation to all the partners that worked on this effort, and to staff. I mean, it's incredible that we're here, maybe not quite as quickly as we would all like. And I look forward to keeping track of this in terms of implementation standards and what the timeline looks like. So we're at the point where we could use a motion on this item. Do we have anyone wanting to do that? Mr. Settlemyer.
Thank you. I would recommend a motion to adopt the vegetation preservation environmental threshold carrying capacities as presented in attachment A.
Right. Any questions from the committee members? If not, doesn't look like it. Tracy, the roll call, please.
Ms. Lane,
Yes.
Mr. Rice,
Yes.
Mr. Settlemyer,
Yes.
Ms. Conrad Seda,
Yes.
Ms. Williamson,
Yes.
Ms. Fastinos.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes.
Great. Thank you all. And again, to staff, much appreciation for all this tremendously hard work. All right. So that brings us to agenda item 6, which is a presentation on public engagement and outreach for the Environmental Improvement Program. And information on this item can be found on page 253 of your books. And I'll turn this over now to Kim Carringer for a presentation.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm really excited to give this presentation to you all with my partner here, Sarah Underhill, our communications director. It's actually a good segue from the threshold updates to the EIP and your comments, Member Lane, on how we see this work actually happening on the ground. So the presentation is on outreach and engagement, and I'm going to kick it off on just why this matters for the EIP. As you all know, the EIP isn't a single project or one entity implementing it. It's many different partners implementing a coordinated basin-wide capital investment program to advance thresholds, right? So every year, on average, 30 projects are underway across forest health, water quality, watershed restoration, sustainable recreation, transportation, science. It's huge, right? And TRPA serves as the leader and convener of that partnership. And from the public's perspective, that coordination isn't always necessarily visible or obvious. Someone that may be traveling around the basin is maybe looking at individual projects and construction sites and maybe even mad because they're sitting in traffic while an EIP project is in front of them, with them not even realizing that that's part of a bigger program and that those are all connected. So that gap in understanding of what the EIP is or why we're doing it is showing up in our data. We do annual public surveys, and our most recent survey showed about 44% of respondents did not know what the EIP was or that they were familiar with it. So that's kind of a meaningful signal for a program that's delivering dozens of projects every year and relies on public funding and public support and support from our elected officials. So the partnership just this last year all agreed we should put more effort into elevating the awareness around the EIP. And so I think it's really important to do it not just to see the projects and why they're doing it, but people should know where that funding is going, the progress that's being made, can we track it? So it's a lot about accountability too, to say we're working together, we are sticking to our priorities, and we're tracking our progress. So the goal of the presentation today is to show you what Team Tahoe has been working on for outreach strategies. And as always, we welcome any of your feedback as we're honing these. So would love to hear anything as we go along. So with that, next slide, I'll just do one more before I hand it over to Sarah. This is just a quick look back on the history of the EIP communications. You all know the EIP started in 1997, and that first logo on the left was developed back in like 2009, 2010. It predates me. And then the second one was about 10 years ago. And so every, 10-ish years, we're looking as a partnership at our logo, our visual identity. And it's important because all of the partners are using this one logo. This logo avoids us having 80 logos on every single project, sign, or paper. And ultimately, the goal is people see this logo and they know, oh, that's part of the EIP. That's a multi-partner project that's using funding like the Lake Tahoe Restoration Act or state funding, local funding, private funding. So this slide kind of shows you how it evolves over time. We like to modernize it to keep it current, and it usually coincides with when we're bringing big updates to the program. And we want to make sure we're consistently talking about it with our partners. So that's a good transition for me to hand it over to Sarah to talk to you about the latest update to this.
Good morning, everyone. Sarah Underhill, TRPA's Communications Director. Thank you, Kim. I'm just going to, next slide, please, walk us through the new visual identity of the EIP. So Mason's previous presentation was a good example of using the EIP branding and presentations to highlight the work being done by the Environmental Improvement Program. So this is the new logo. There's a horizontal version and then a stacked vertical version for various content. The Team Tahoe badge we came up with, as Senator Feinstein always often referred to, the EIP partnership, and everyone working to protect Lake Tahoe as Team Tahoe. So we decided to lean into this term for the partnership and create this cool Team Tahoe badge. And everything I'm going to walk through today, there's a few examples over here if you guys want stickers. Next slide, please. So we rolled out the new look and feel of the EIP at the summit this past August. Oh, sorry, thanks. With EIP branded materials such as the Tahoe Summit poster on the left. You can see the new Tahoe Summit logo, which really ties into the EIP logo, but with kind of more of a stately event feel with the navy blue and the orange. In the upper right, you see the Team Tahoe partnership, and where we created an EIP step and repeat banner for the green room at Valhalla for photo opportunities with Team Tahoe. Next slide, please. So EIP outreach materials, these are just some examples of EIP branding in action. We have the EIP brochure, which includes a high-level overview of the program and partnership and directs the reader to the website restoretahoe.org for more information. So we're still working on finalizing this document, but it will be used at events and to orient the public and new partners to the EIP. And then the Conservancy produced this Upper Truckee River watershed resilience brochure for the summit this year. So it's just an example of the partnership really leaning into this branding and using it for highlighting their projects. Next slide, please. So the partnership map, this is just a core objective of the strategic communications project was to create cohesive messaging and branding that all the partners could use. So this is just an asset or a visual for partners to use in their presentations and materials to show how there's 80+ partners working daily to protect the lake and implement projects around the EIP. Next slide. So EIP project signage, like Kim mentioned, if you're sitting in traffic, there's a reason, and it's usually to better the lake and to save the lake. So we have this tagline, another lake saving project, that's on all EIP project signs that's around the lake. In the history slide, you saw the old version. This is just an updated, modernized version with the new branding, directing people to restoretahoe.org for more information. And this is the first sign that was up out in Myers at the Pioneer Trail US Highway 50 roundabout. You can see coming into Tahoe. And signage is it's a component of each EIP project permit. So the goal is for every EIP project under construction in the basin to have this sign to help increase the public's understanding of all the work happening under the EIP. Next slide. Profiles on progress. So this is an EIP-focused monthly e-newsletter, which highlights the partnership in action and progress on the ground. We mail it out to 12,000 contacts every month. And we have, I think it's a 35% open rate. So a lot of eyes on this. We spotlight an EIP project every month and profile a Team Tahoe member of the partnership in each issue, as well as a knowledge drop that highlights the science and data behind the EIP. Next slide. Social media. So our amazing communications specialist, Thea Schwartz, came on board 7 months ago, I guess now, and our social media presence has really dramatically increased. In each post, we include an EIP project, or in each post that does include an EIP project or educates around the program, we tag Lake Tahoe EIP for awareness. And this Osprey post that Thea created highlights the wildlife monitoring component of the EIP. And the post went viral and received 34,000 views and 878 interactions on Instagram, which is pretty impressive. So you can go to TRPA Tahoe to see all these posts and follow along. Next up, Tahoe in Depth. So we've been producing Tahoe in Depth since 2012. It's the only environmental newspaper mailed to all Tahoe Basin homeowners. So that's 36,000 people we mail to twice a year. And we publish a third issue around August that highlights the summit and the EIP. And that issue we distribute around the basin, as well as the other issues, around 5,000 at various locations. such as coffee shops, partner organizations, and visitor centers. Also, this past December, we inserted 23,000 papers into the Tribune and Sierra Sun to further our reach with visitors and the local community. And as Kim mentioned, with the awareness going down to 44%, we really we cross-tabulate our survey data and looked at Tahoe in-depth readers actually have a 70% awareness of the EIP. So it's just proving that it's an incredible, highly effective educational tool for the EIP. Next slide. So this is exciting, restoretahoe.org. This is our new website that's coming out. We're actively working on it now. I have a deadline tomorrow. The purpose of the site is to educate the public and stakeholders on the history and story of the EIP and explain the Team Tahoe partnership and include info on all EIP focus areas, including highlighted projects and news and events. So this will be a really incredible public portal for information for the EIP that partners can point to as well. In the upper right-hand corner is a screenshot of the EIP tracker, which is specific to the projects on the ground. So restoretahoe.org will heavily link to that site for more details. And yeah, we hope to be live by the end of February. And next slide. So coming up in 2026, like I mentioned, restoretahoe.org working on. We have an EIP media tour that we're scheduling for June where we'll bring regional and hopefully some national media outlets to the lake to tour important EIP projects around our focus areas such as watershed restoration and forest health. And we have community EIP tours that we're planning to show the public what projects are happening on the ground this summer. And then, of course, the big event in August, the 30th Tahoe Summit. So really looking back at the last 30 years of the EIP and the partnership. And then in the fall, we have the Best in Basin Awards that highlights exemplary completed EIP projects on the ground. So that'll be happening in the fall. Big year ahead. And next slide. So that's all. Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I may just round out, excellent presentation from Sarah and Kim. Just a little context also for this committee and the current membership of the committee. The origin story of a lot of this work grew out of the TRPA governing board when I joined the agency in 2003. And I believe, Shelley Eldine may remember this, board member who was serving at the time. The EIP governing board formed the first ever environmental education committee, and the board recognized the need for us to do a better job of working with the community. So we've been on this long journey. The committee has evolved over time, which is now the EIP committee, and education and outreach is one component of the whole program. So just really appreciate our governing board's leadership in recognizing that in order to get public funding for restoration, to continue the support that we have, to educate the community about what's happening in their very neighborhoods, the transparency of the funding that goes to all the projects. It's been quite a long journey, and I'm really proud of the team and working with our partners. There's a committee that we co-lead with the League to Save Lake Tahoe on communications and funding within the EIP that's been very connected and involved and engaged in this new visual identity. So thanks for us giving us the opportunity to tell you about that today.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Sandra. Any questions? Yes.
Ashley Conrad Zeta for the record. I just had a question on one slide. You were showing the partners and you had a blue panel for Washoe tribe. And I was wondering, were they comfortable with the placement as a separate jurisdiction in that way? Because it looked different. It was like, state, tribe. And I just wanted to make sure that, yeah, they were consulted and they feel comfortable with the way that all looks. I'm assuming they were, but yeah.
Kim Carringer for the record. Yes, absolutely. We consulted with the Washoe tribe to add their logo and put it as their own sovereign government on there. Before, we didn't have it. We really wanted to elevate their role in the EIP because they're a key member. So it's great.
Thank you. Yeah. And then one other thing, I think it's really important that folks understand the challenges of getting some of these projects done as well. And so as much as we celebrate the successes, right? Like this takes so much time. And I think if we could move faster, we could get more done. If we had more funding, we could get more done. And so I'm wondering if on restoretahoe.org, there could actually be a section where you talk about, opportunities to accelerate. And so it doesn't have to be like, here's everything that went wrong, but just maybe some opportunities to accelerate where moving faster to funding, accepting best practices, and not requiring X, Y, or Z pieces before every project, but aligning with broader or longer term planning so that we can pull the trigger when the weather conditions align to do some of the work that we're trying to do. And I find that when we talk about those opportunities for advancement or for moving faster in a bunch of different fora, it does make it easier for decision makers to, adopt regulations and adopt budgets that allow us to achieve these goals faster. So if there's any way to call those out as just like, here's what you can do to make it possible for us to do more, that would really help, I think, with advocacy on the ground too.
Thank you.
You want to add something?
I did want to just add to that, if I may, Madam Chair, Julie Reagan, for the record, really appreciate Member Comrade Sada's comments. And I am hearkening back to Bud Hicks, who was a presidential appointee who chaired our Wildfire and Forest Health Committee, which we also have folded into this committee overall during the time when Dr. Kat McIntyre was working with that committee to change our code of ordinances around the steep slopes restriction. It's a great example. At the time, we were also very engaged, our team, with the Forest Service, the Tahoe Conservancy, many partners on the Lake Tahoe West, the 60,000 acres. And I think at every meeting, Bud would ask, when are we getting going on this project, right? And this is some years. And very astutely, the Forest Service, the Forest Supervisor, the day before the shutdown and last fall, signed the record of decision to move forward with that Lake Tahoe West project. So there's, I think, 45,000 acres that's getting going next summer, but that was too long of a lag. And I think we, as often the glue of that partnership, recognize the need to kind of advance that pace and scale, really scale up. These projects are extremely difficult to do, to get on the ground. There are good reasons to do all the environmental work that's required of these projects, but we have to do more and do it faster. So really appreciate the suggestions.
Great. Oh, and I should have added the new branding looks great. So thank you so much.
Okay, any further comments, discussion? Many of the members? No? Okay, well, I just want to say that, again, being a remote member of this committee, I deeply appreciate getting all of the communications materials that are shared by staff, and they're just so informative and a way to keep and on top of the, at least 30 projects a year that are ongoing. So I think these communication tools are really, really important. And one of the things that did click for me when you were talking about the signage for a project, and I'm like 99.9% sure that this happens, but while projects are under construction, also having similar signage so that people know that this is a project that is part of the EIP partnership. So, hey, coming to you soon, a clearer Lake Tahoe as a result of this project, something like that I think helps to inform people that this is actually an EIP program and not just something of, we're replacing potholes or something like that I think would really elevate the information for local residents would be very helpful. So with that, if we don't have any further comments, this was an informational item. So thank you all for the presentation and deep appreciation for all of your work. Okay, so now we're moving on to agenda item number 7, which is committee member comments. Have any committee members that wish to make comments? No? Okay.
One note, tomorrow, the Natural Resources Agency is hosting a nature-based solutions summit in Sacramento. There's I think 300 people registered, and I think there's options for Zoom, but if there's an opportunity for anyone to join, please do. It looks like a bunch of good discussions. And one of the panels will be specifically about some of these best practices and also some of the challenges, right? And how to energize more nature-based solutions on the ground.
Great, thank you. Okay, the final matter of business is our general public interest comment period. Any member of the public wishing to address the Environmental Improvement Program Committee on any item listed or not listed on the agenda may do so at this time Individuals or groups who have already commented on items listed on the agenda are not permitted to comment on that same topic. The EIP committee can only deliberate or act on items listed on the posted agenda. To ensure proper public notice, committee members typically won't respond to comments or unlisted topics except to correct factual errors, ask for staff clarification, or request that a topic be placed on the future agenda. Finally, comments must relate to matters within the jurisdiction of the agency. If any member of the public wishes to speak at this time, please raise your hand now and come up to the podium. And for those people that may be online, please raise your hand in the Zoom meeting screen, or if you're on the phone, dialing *9 on your phone. Okay, thank you. Please go ahead.
Good morning, Ellie Waller. Happy New Year, everyone. I'm just here this morning to say that I attended the first oversight committee, legislative oversight committee for TRPA and Marlette Water System. Julie gave a presentation. There was lots of good information provided from lots of different people. And I'm just encouraging you as board members, I'm sure I'm going to be here for the end of the entire board, to attend these. Ms. Aldine was there. She's always there. We're always happy to see her. There's lots of information that doesn't necessarily get disseminated to the general public about those meetings and what comes out of those meetings, and requests to Julie to impart to your staffs. So I really highly encourage you, especially since the next 4 meetings are going to be in this building. The next meeting is February 27th. There'll be transportation, visitors authorities. I can't remember what else is on that agenda, but they're full. And I think this new committee now has a better understanding the duration of these meetings. I think it's often that the new members of these committees don't know the details that get presented, like from Member Settlemeyer's group of people that come up and talk about the EIP funding. So I think it's really good for each of you to at least attend one of the next 5 sessions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other people wanting to speak in the audience? No? Do we have anyone online, Catherine?
Madam Chair, there are no hands raised to comment.
Great. Okay, well, that will close our public comment period, and we'll move on to adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any abstain or opposed? No? Okay. All right, motion passes. We are adjourned.